friends, I'm Ashley and welcome to Darling Cottage Diary. If you are new to my channel, just so you know, the same video will be posted in a few days without the voiceover. So I have a huge playlist of no talking ASMR type of journaling videos on my channel, as well as a chatty list of me talking, because some people like the voiceover, some people like both, some people like just the quiet. So this journal that I'm showing right here is one of the digital kits that I have listed on my website. And even if you have your own digitals or your own paper that you want to know how to make this mini journal out of, I have a whole playlist on how I made this, which I will link above and below. But I felt I go through this thing where I struggle with envisioning what I want to make in my art journals, especially for videos sometimes. And I need to remember that just if I'm feeling that way, I need to go mini or I need to go tiny. That usually makes me feel better and reignites my creativity. And so I've done a couple of bigger pages and spreads the last couple of weeks, and I don't know, I was feeling a little like I just didn't have any ideas. So I decided to take this month's Ephemera Club goodies. If you don't know what an Ephemera Club is, I send out these parcels to my higher tier patrons every month. They vote on the theme, and then recently I've been creating pretty much all of it because haven't had great time nor just luck with thrifting lately. I like sending out vintage book pages and stuff like that, but I just haven't found any that have matched the themes that we've chosen the past couple weeks. But this theme is Southern Gothic, and I was so excited to make all of these. Some of them are images that just photographs that I've taken on travels and turned them into kind of watercolors. Some of them are from antique magazines that I've found, like 1800 women's magazines I've found, and just superimpose them on different backgrounds. The stickers are, I mean, just like the key that you see on my desk. I wanted it all to feel very Southern Gothic. And then these two images are in Inspiration Club. Those you can download and print as many times as you want. I'll leave that link below. It's just search Darling Cottage Diary on Patreon. And I wanted to use a lot of them because I was so inspired and excited by this theme itself. So if you saw my Spooky House, Spooky Mansion series this past fall, I kind of was inspired to do that a little bit just with this one video, which is kind of why it ended up so long. I didn't mean to make so many pages, but it's just what happens sometimes when you get going and you get creative. But I had this idea of being inspired by two of my favorite books / films, and then another film that I really like, that are all very, I would say, the Southern Gothic vibe. First one being Sharp Objects by Gillian Flynn, which was also made into a really fantastic miniseries by HBO, and that stars Amy Adams. And then Where the Crawdads Sing, which has kind of become one of my favorite comfort movies. And it's also a fantastic book. The book is definitely a little grittier and it focuses more on survival. The movie was shot very much like, the whole time I was watching it, I was like, I know this is filmed in Louisiana because I recognize the trees and like I recognize the vegetation. I recognize the places. And the fact that all the actors are not sweating constantly, they must have filmed this in very early spring or had some, just the like humid green tinged elements were not there. That was opposite the case in the movie The Skeleton Key, which was the third inspiration. They definitely showed the humid just cloud that kind of sits on the south during the summer. But I was just inspired by all three of those to create kind of like a mystery pages. It turned out to be multiple pages, but just kind of like creepy, but also pretty in a creepy way, if that makes sense. Just like the words Southern Gothic sound of like, I'm a little uncomfortable by this, but also it's beautiful homes and pretty moss that's climbing up walls and that kind of thing. So that was the vibe I was going for, and I wanted it to have multiple layers of, as I'm going through these pages, maybe a little bit of a mystery is unfolding. And so I used names and quotes and stuff like that from those three books and films. So this vellum page was giving me so much of a headache because I didn't know what I wanted to put in the middle of that circle, but I loved the candelabras on the side of that building, and so I was excited that I still got to showcase that, because if I had done just a mini booklet or something, unless you turned it over, you wouldn't have been able to see it. So I like how that turned out. And then I kind of had this idea as I was making this to maybe have this trifold open, and we're learning more about the story as it goes through. Like there's a creepy element of maybe something happened in a garden, or a garden is important to somebody. And then that book page is actually from last week's episode of Anne of Green Gables, and I took the image. It's not even from either, like, any of these stories. It was from a C.S. Lewis book called The Magician's Nephew, but the image fit Anne and Gilbert perfectly, so I used the top of that page in that one, and then the bottom words on this page talking about how maybe he has a wife shut up there made me think, okay, this is like kind of a creepy thing that I can put on just to decorate the back of this image so that it's not stark white. I didn't want any stark white in this spread, because nothing in like the Southern Gothic aesthetic is clean or bleached or anything. It is covered with mildew or moss, or it's tea stained or water stained, and that's part of what I like about it, is like nothing is new and shiny. Everything is kind of old and vintagey, but it has a creepy air to it. Anyway, so speaking of that initial vellum page, if you are trying to glue something on vellum, it is going to show through. The only thing I've been able to use to get around it is if it's on a printed vellum, putting double-sided tape where it's printed darker, and that doesn't show through typically. So even acetone basically will show through even after it's dry, which is annoying. And the glue stick I'm using also does pretty well at not showing through, but it does make it warp, so because it's water-based. So that is my only complaint with that glue stick. I really liked it otherwise. It's very sticky and it has good coverage, so I've been pleased with it so far. But anyway, here I wanted to make this fold out element, but that it pretty much any washi tape, if you work with washi tape, you know that it's nice, because if you want to take it off at some point, it's not going to rip your paper, but it's not very good at sticking things together if you want it to be permanent. So I just added a little bit of acetone glue there so that it can act more like a hinge instead of taping something down. And yeah, that's my secret for using washi tape as an actual like tape and not just decoration. But I like how this ended up, because it's like, surprise, we're in a creepy garden with ivy growing on this statue's face. And so the part of this story that I had was like, it's, you know, this secret garden that has this key, and you have to use the key to open the lock to get into it. And within this garden, you know, we find one of my favorite quotes. It's on the very first page of Where the Crawdads Sing. But I wanted that to be part of this little garden space, because it is talking about the swamp itself. And I love a lot of the prose describing things in that book, because living in a swamp in the South is very, very accurate, and it's in a like beautiful corpse kind of way, if that makes sense. All of my goth girlies out there, you will understand, right? Some people like just want the world blooming all the time and everything, but there is beauty in darkness a lot of times, and I find that in the swamp quite a lot, and that's a big reason why I liked these books. Now, the quote that I'm about to write on this little sticker page is from Where the Crawdads Sing, and it is, "Swamp water is still and dark, having swallowed the light in its muddy throat. The swamp is quiet because decomposition is cellular work." And part of this little monologue was at the beginning of the movie, whenever Kaya is talking about the difference between marsh and swamp. And they didn't add that quote in, and I was really surprised because it just, I don't know, I feel like it perfectly encapsulated what a swamp is. And she was contrasting it to all of the sounds the birds make and the waves and, fish jumping. And a marsh has a lot of life in it. And the swamp does too, but most of the creatures who live in a swamp have to do with decomposition. Or they're quiet because it's a quiet place. It's insulated by Spanish moss hanging off trees. It's insulated by all of the, the still water. The water doesn't really move even when the tides change. It might come up and down, but it doesn't roll in like it does at the beach or in a marsh. And so, you think swamp, you think night crawlers and beetles and alligators and all these things that move very quietly and slowly to get their prey. And so anyway, or mushrooms growing on trees, and the primary sounds you hear in a swamp are cicadas during during the summer, and the occasional bird depending on what it is. But even the birds are quieter when they're in the canopies in a swamp compared to the kind of sounds they make when they're out on a marsh. So if you don't know what all of these stories are about, you might be lost at this point. That kind of just occurred to me. So the Skeleton Key, it was probably the least influential of the three stories in my pages here, and it's kind of a southern hoodoo thriller that came out around the early 2000s or maybe mid 2000s. And stars Kate Hudson. She's an in-home nurse and discovers that this old house and elderly couple she goes to live in and work with has some secrets, and those secrets are a lot older than she ever thought, and there's a lot more supernatural energies at play in it. And I do like it because although it is quite a caricature of like hoodoo practice and Southern culture, it is very like scarily pretty. And so it's like, it's not one that I watch often, but it did stick with me as just at that time period when I was a teenager. There wasn't a whole lot of movies about specifically like the rural South that were out, and I liked it because it was an aesthetic that I could relate to a little bit, I guess. And then the other two is what mostly influenced these pages. And the Sharp Objects is about a woman, she's a reporter, and she goes back to her hometown. She obviously has some, childhood emotional damage kind of issues. She's a pretty gone alcoholic. She's got a lot of stuff going on in her head. She lost her sister when they were kids. Her younger sister died, and she has another younger sister who she hadn't met before and who's a teenager at this point. And so she is investigating the disappearances and the crimes and disappearances that have happened to two little girls in her hometown. And she doesn't want to go back. Her boss sends her. Her boss is like this daddy figure who is trying to push her to deal with her stuff, but also like sees her having a great career if she could just get out of her own head. And so she sums it up perfectly at the beginning of the book and saying, you know, her boss is asking her, well, what's in Wind Gap in her hometown? She's like, well, it's about population of 2,000 and has been for the last century, and the only industry really is hog butchering locally, and then people move there and commute to the big city. So really, you got your old money and your trash. And he was like, well, what are you? And she's like, trash from old money. So, and that sums up how she feels about her family and her town. And so we see all kinds of things about her childhood, her personality. There is a love interest in there, but it's not super intense. It's just kind of, there's a detective who's working there trying to solve the serial elements of what's going on, and she gets closer to her sister, and then there are lots and twists of turns in the very last few pages, and you know I love I love a good twisty book. So if you haven't seen it or read it, I definitely highly recommend those. And then Where the Crawdads Sing is about, it's based in like the 50s and 60s of this little girl who is basically abandoned by her whole family, and she makes it work. Like, she lives in the swamp in this old shack, and she learns how to dig mussels and live off of the swamp, and survives by herself. And the adults who know about what's going on, but they don't want to interfere. Almost, it's like she's doing okay by herself. There's one couple in particular who own a little bait and gas shop that she goes to regularly, and you can tell that, you know, they make sure she gets clothes and anything that the church donates for, you know, people in need, and like they make sure that she has what she needs, but they let her earn it, and they let her kind of be by herself because she's not asking for help, and she's so independent. I love that about that character. She's so independent, and she's so determined. And so this little oil, I needed to oil that key because it was starting to rust, and so I was like, you know what, this is a little extra kind of creepy element. We got to fish the key out of somewhere where it's been hidden, and then so that we can unlock our book and find all of these documents to add to our little case file here. And do it for the aesthetic. And so anyway, with the story, it comes up that a body turns up in the swamp, and she has connections to this guy, and it's mostly a survivalist story, but it's also a story about being ostracized. I can't say ostracization. Yes, being ostracized by a community, but as well as love and extrafamilial friendships and things like that. There is a love story in it as well, which is really, really good, and I liked the whole thing. And so the sharp objects is what I really had inspiration for this little case file folder, and I'm writing another quote from the Sharp Objects book. Adora, who is the mom, Adora devours you, and if you don't let her, it'll be even worse for you. And this is said to the main character, Camille, by her mom's best friend. She's just trying to figure out she's trying to figure out some things about her mom, and I don't want to give it away if you haven't read it. We can do spoilers in the comments, so if you haven't seen it and you don't want to be spoiled, go watch stuff before you read comments. If you want to talk about any of these shows or books, yes, talk to me, talk in the comments, because I love discussing them. But anyway, so I had this, and look at this ridiculous thing I found at a thrift store. It's probably not antique, I'm sure it's a replica, but it had all the pieces, which you almost never find with these old inkwells, and I couldn't help myself. So Anyway, I had the inspiration from Sharp Objects on the case file, and so I was like, I need, some stickers that talk about it being evidence, and this is super hush hush because I know that eyes only are usually only for like government high security stuff, but with this, because the mom in the story is so revered and she's very wealthy and she just very iron hand in a silk glove, iron fist in a silk glove, that's the saying. She, is not above ruining somebody's reputation. She's not above having somebody run out of town. She's not above any of this because she wants control of her little town. And so I kind of wanted this to be a case study that maybe only the detective was keeping to make sure that Adora, the mom, didn't get wind of it and try to bury it. And there's also a pretty significant part towards the end of the story about a case file on her sister who died when she was young that's left to Camille by the detective that reveals basically the climax, it sets up the climax of what's going to happen at the end of the story. So I wanted to have this little file, and again, all of the elements inside it I tried to tie back to that story with the quote and then with little letters. And I think one of the miniature printed pages is a medical file. There's one that talks about a certain kind of salts, and then there's family photo, a happy family photo with pictures. Roses have a really big symbolic element in the show. The mom is very, very particular about her roses. They get crashed at one point, and she blames her older daughter, Camille, and it's like this point of contention with them, but her mom is a rose. She's always got these spiked talon heels on like thorns. She's beautiful and always put together on the surface, on top of everything, but underneath she's just covered in thorns and is not above hurting people. And so I wanted to add that little element in as well of this is not your typical this is not your typical catch the bad guy kind of story. And that's another thing I really liked about it. And I wanted to go ahead and take a second to thank my Ephemera Club for supporting me this month. And there are quite a few more of you, so that's awesome. And some people who had left for a few months have come back, which is always great. So thank you, RL, Rasha, Anita, Anya, Britt, Carly, Krista, Denise, Jennifer, Kim, Leprechaun Mom, Nikki, Patsy, Kenna, Susan, Teresa, Alicia, Cindy, Donna, Effie, Emily, Catherine, Kathleen, Kathy, Carrie, Rachel, Shayna, Tanya, Tracy, Venus, W, and Sasha. And I won't repeat myself on what Ephemera Club is and everything. Feel free to check it out if you want to, since I already explained it at the beginning of the video. But anyway, all of these little offcuts and extra pieces, I love trying to keep in the same type of page or multi-pages so that there is some continuity. And I just hate getting rid of especially things like die cuts because they're so pretty. And this little page here, with it being vellum and see-through, that's what spurred the inspiration basically for this whole little multi-open page, because I just wanted layers upon layers upon layers, because in these stories I feel like that's how they're filmed and how the stories are told, is just the longer you look at it or the more times you watch it, you get more details that you didn't see before. This is a skull that I have that I found. I went to an estate sale of a dentist who had recently passed last summer, and he had a collection of bones and skulls from all different kinds of animals. He had cows. I think that one, it's either a coyote or bobcat. I think it's a bobcat by the way the canines are shaped. And then it's got a little cicada shell sitting on top of it. That is literally sitting on a cabinet in my parlor because I'm a spooky lady. But I just thought it would make a perfect sticker for this. theme. But anyway, I went. It was a huge house, like probably 5,000 square foot house back in the woods somewhere. I had no. Speaking of creepy colonial houses on the swamp. That's exactly where I got that silly skull. And he had a giant tortoise skull, and he had multiple like horses and cow skulls. He had a real human skull, which I was absolutely not going to pay like over $1,000 for, but I could lower myself for a bobcat skull because it looked really cool. And I like the spirit of cats. I can't own one because I'm mildly allergic to them. I've tried to adopt a cat before, and it had to be an outdoor barn cat because my throat tried to close up on me. But I like how sassy cats are, and that they don't question their comfort, and that they are just here. Their existence is a pleasure to everybody, and that is an energy that I try to remind myself to keep sometimes. This whole little booklet I got from Michael's back in the fall, and I really haven't used very many of them at all. I used one to recover Wuthering Heights book, which I'll go ahead and link down below for you. But when I saw this, I was like, oh, that'd be perfect to make put the last quote that I wanted in this little bottle, and it can hide along with this seemingly happy little dandelion. But I don't know. I wanted these first pages to look less sinister. I wanted them to look more inviting and like comforting. And then the more you open up these pages, the creepier it gets. This is my goal. And so this is a postcard that I made for Ephemera Club. And I figured the background with the mixture of the branches and the blue kind of looks like, water or something, then muddy on the bottom. It just fit the vibe. So I was kind of sad to cut up the postcard, but I'll use the rest of it in another project, I'm sure. So to make it swivel, I was trying to poke a hole in it and then add a brad. The brad decided to go flying. I still have not found it, but luckily I had another one. But anyway, so I wanted to have this to kind of open up the idea. And also, again, if you know what Sharp Objects is about, it maybe also alludes to Mommy Dearest. So I tried to associate every single little bit to one of those 3 stories, and I really like how it turned out. So this quote is, "I'm Persephone, queen of the underworld." And that's actually said by the younger sister in one of the episodes towards the end, and I think it's said in the book too. But she's in a altered state of mind, not by her choice, we shall say. And I love that they did that because Gillian Flynn's such a good writer. The allusion to, once you see the very end and you can digest the entire show, you realize that, a lot of the characters are Persephone in different ways. And she's leading up to saying that. She's talking about that she's been reading a book about Greek goddesses, and that Persephone, she feels bad for her because she's the spring maiden. But then she goes to the underworld, and when she comes back every spring, the humans are afraid of her, even though she's well-liked. In theory, people are still afraid of her, and she likes that about her. And so that's all I'll say. But and this was a miscut. All of these little die cuts that are in the ephemera parcels this month, I hand put through my die cut machine because my Cricut is got a ghost in it, or is just, it's on the fritz and it's not behaving. So I was using that, and that was just a miscut, so I thought I'd use that in my own journals. Anyway, so adds just that extra little detail whimsy to make it look kind of old and creepy. Anyway, so as we open, you can see that more of the outside pages are more influenced by Sharp Objects, and the interior pages are more influenced by Where the Crawdad Sings. So two of my favorite Southern Gothic stories. Go check them out if you have not, and talk with me in the comments about your biggest oh my gosh moments, or your biggest, what point you knew what was going on in either story, or if it was total a surprise or anything like that. Just all the spoilers, talk with me down in the comments, because I gotta talk to somebody about this. I hope y'all have a great week. Thank you so much for being here. I will be posting the no voiceover ASMR version of this. This is posting Saturday, so I'll probably post it on Monday. Hope you have a great week. If you have any requests for future videos, definitely put those in the comments as well. Thank you so much for being here. Bye.